And young and lovely, the girl from Ipanema goes walking, and when she passes each one, she passes goes, oh. When she walks, it's like a song, but it's sweet.
I love that song, Charles.
I love Brazil.
I love Brazil too. I think a lot of people maybe have never been to Brazil, but it's a beautiful country. It's too bad there's such turmoil and economic disparity there. But knowing you, my friend, I'm sure we'll be hearing about that today.
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, just before we get in, and we should, I suppose, bow in tribute to the art department yet again for another fantastic poster, and we'll get into that in a second. But on a hopeful note, a lot could happen to frustrate the new president of Brazil. He's taking on the corrupt Communist Party, the jailed former leader of Brazil, who was head of the Communist Party, who's, some tout him as one of the biggest criminals on the planet.
Is that Lula?
Lula, yeah.
I think a lot of people in the United States don't know anything about what's going on in Brazil.
But this guy who's been elected, Bolsonaro, is determined to once and for all make Brazil great for the first time, I suppose.
Brazil great for the first time. Do people realize, Charles, that Brazil was a military dictatorship until like 1983?
It was indeed. It was indeed. And my mother's mother was born in Brazil, which is where she met my maternal grandfather. And I, being the eldest, knew nothing about Brazil. My next brother down has a Brazilian middle name, which is a name linked to our family somehow. And so he resolved in college that he would, or before college, that he would actually become an expert on Brazil. And he spent a lot of time down in Brazil, lived in Brazil for more than 10 years, different stints. And in fact, he had, as he was leaving Brazil, he and his family had a beautiful apartment right overlooking this beach, where we spent quite a bit of time, including New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1999.
Very probably without Bill Clinton, Jeffrey Epstein, Monica Lewinsky, or any of these 15-year-old flight attendants.
As far as we knew. Exactly.
But Brazil is fantastic. The food is great. The people that I've met are really kind. It's got an exceptional flair that I guess the French would call it joie de vivre.
Well, yeah, there are a couple odd things about Brazil. I won't spoil this for people, but one odd thing that most people don't know is that Brazil has the highest concentration of Japanese ancestry people.
I thought you were going to say hot women, but I knew that actually.
Yeah, no, that would be your job to explain that. But outside Japan, so there's quite a large number of people who would appear to be Japanese, but in fact are Brazilian, and second, third, fourth generation Brazilian-looking Japanese. In consequence, there's fantastic Japanese food in Brazil, on top of the Brazilian and other types of food.
And most churrascarias in Brazil have a sushi bar there.
To start, you start with that, and then you go into,
It's very strange. You know, years ago, when 21st Century 3D was in full swing, and we were making the transition from tape-based recording formats to almost totally digital. I don't think really anybody, even HD cam, is really not even used anymore. I sold a very expensive digital tape, professional recorder to a Japanese guy who was in New York from Brazil.
There you go.
And he had a Brazilian accent.
There you go. He was probably Brazilian.
He was born in Brazil, but Japanese, and he explained that to me.
And one of the best chains, indeed, I think we went out to I have, of course, 2 kids, and this brother has 3, and we were all down there together, and the kids at that age, they were quite, obviously a lot younger, 20 years younger. They love this chain of churrascarias called Porcão, which is this gigantic pig.
I think it's only in Brazil, those churrascarias.
But I mean, it's really for grown-ups and kids alike. I mean, it's got everything. It's fantastic.
I love churrascarias. People can go to like Fogo de Chão. That's probably one of the most authentic ones in the United States. Charles, we've got a lot of commenters joining us early in the international flair here. Stan wants us to know that a Brazilian company owns Tim Hortons in Canada. So if you want some marginal donuts and coffee with a Brazilian flair, you could go there. And then also Dan C. is reminding me that if I want to speak French and say things like joie de vivre, I should wear a yellow vest. What yellow vest?
What yellow vest? Where did he come up with that?
It's, you know, we haven't spoken much about it, Charles, but the yellow vest protests continue. I think they're in the 11th week, and meanwhile we're hearing about, you know, real Native Americans who are fake Vietnam veterans creating fake news by getting right up in the grill of some 15-year-old kid who has just had himself smeared all over the place, death threats.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Well, let's get back into the artwork's wonderful work
Sure.
here, and maybe you're the curator of the art department. And
Exactly.
But perhaps we might explain who some of these people are.
Well, today you've selected a movie that really is one of my all-time favorites, and for a lot of different reasons. It actually represents a Hollywood era that is gone, and I don't think you'll ever see another movie like Blame It on Rio, not because of the content, but just because it's one of these movies where it's just basically about like 4 actors, and there's no exploding robots or superheroes, and it's just probably cost, you know, $5 million to make it at the time that it was made. Hollywood never make a movie like this anymore because you and I, with a couple of actors, could go to Brazil and make this film, and they need more competitive stuff these days. But I love this movie, and it's all about you know, Michael Caine, and they go on a trip to Brazil, and his friend's daughter is back from college. So it seemed like the perfect opportunity to integrate 2 of everybody's, well, I don't know about favorite, but certainly best known rapists, pedophiles, whatever we want to call them. But I found this picture of Bill Clinton allegedly on Jeffrey Epstein's jet, the Lolita Express, with this decidedly young-looking flight attendant. Intern, yeah. And then we've also got Jeffrey Epstein with a girl who I don't think is the Russian prostitute who's been arrested in Thailand, but she sure looks a lot like her, and definitely got me thinking, do they have some stable of prostitutes that they can inject into scenarios to be arrested and force them to testify against people when they need to? And then of course we have Jeffrey Epstein with Ghislaine Maxwell, who...
Isn't she the daughter of Bob, I Still Don't Float Maxwell?
I thought she was the daughter of that Mossad spy...
Robert Maxwell.
Robert Maxwell, right, Bob, right.
I still can't float.
What, did he drown?
He died under mysterious circumstances because his yacht blew up or something.
Oh, no, they are apt to do that, Charles. You got to stay away from those exploding yachts. And then, of course, you know, we've got the swimsuit competition right here.
Oh, my God.
This is made of Tyvek to hold it together while it's, you know. And then, of course, you know, just a tip of the hat to the intern department there. But... oh, and of course, Harvey Weinstein, so...
But isn't the significance of that picture, and I'm not the art guy, but the significance of the Weinstein picture to me is that that's Bill and that's Hillary, I believe.
Yes,
and
with Harvey Weinstein.
They spent a lot of time together out in the Hamptons, a tremendous amount of time.
Yep.
Weinstein was very much involved, you know, assisting, shall we say, Bill Clinton in his post-presidency expeditions around Hollywood and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And very much getting these celebrities to come to political fundraising events and foundation fundraising events.
And there were all kinds of shenanigans going on with Hollywood fundraisers, and people in Hollywood have a lot of money, and in my experience, they're very interested in figuring out ways that they can put things on invoices and take things off invoices. Particularly producers love to do that, get in there and be like, why don't you charge me this much for that and this much for the other thing, and then they're telling somebody else something else, and I'm left there wondering what's going on. I think in our last show we spoke about an IMAX movie where somebody wanted, you know, they had been informed that somebody gave me their money, and I was like, no, that's some totally other money. I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't even gotten all of my money, so you're talking about some other money.
Well, and I mentioned last time, I think, this book, Clinton in Exile, which I managed to get a copy of, and I've now, I read in a very strange way. I go to the index, and then I look at, you know, topics that I find interesting. I read out of order, and then I read the book. But so I'm in the process of really getting into that book, and I can tell you, I think I understand already why that book is tough to find,
Why?
Because it has a lot of very helpful footnoted vignettes of what Bill may have actually been doing in the post-presidency, involving Vinod Gupta, involving Ron Burkle, involving Weinstein, involving Epstein, involving all these people, and lots of comments. So this is a book a lot like the books that Jerry Corsi does, where the author goes out and interviews a whole bunch of people.
And then gets arrested?
No. Actually, it's pretty well done, I think, very well done. And it's a weaving together of many secondary sources, primary interviews, into a chronology that helps explain what Bill might have actually been doing. And it is not a suck-up piece to Bill and the Clintons, although it definitely is told through the prism of Republicans or conservatives are nut jobs, and progressives and liberals are saving the planet. Thanks for them, and thank you, Bill and Hillary. That said, this author, I think, had access when writing the book to Bill and to Hillary, because she mentions, I just left Bill, I just left Hillary, or whatever. But I think the Clinton machine did not like the final product, because there's a lot of negative stuff about the womanizing. When does it say it came out? Yeah, June 9th, 2009. That's really interesting, in paperback.
Well, the thing I'm interested in, since you said it's accurate, I would imagine, I would have thought there'd be a lot of high reviews, but then the average would be 1, because it's
Right.
do the Clinton math on your Amazon review.
Well, where is the hardback version? When did the hardback come out of this?
I don't know.
Can we figure that
Here's
out?
hardcover.
May 6th, 2008. So that's really interesting. So this book came out before Hillary had conceded.
But you can get it for $2.99.
It's more expensive than Hillary's.
Good value for the
Good
book.
value. But so if we could just go back into
Sure.
the art thing for a sec.
Yes.
That book and many others makes the point that that one of the things that is very dangerous for a high-level person is to get involved in this type of monkey business, because who knows how many different corrupt, bad actors, be they state actors or non-state actors or nefarious billionaires and oligarchs around the world, who knows what they're going to do to you once you get into a position of power. And I bring this up because I was watching, I happened to be flipping around the channels yesterday, and I ended up, or maybe it was this morning, on an interview with on PBS with Margaret Hoover, who I have actually interviewed and who's a nice person. And she was actually coming on very hard against that California congressman, former prosecutor, who thinks that he can be the next, maybe a future president of the United States. And the line he and many Democrats have been selling since the Stone indictment, something Pelosi brought up, is, can you imagine what Putin must have on Trump?
Jesus.
I mean, and you think about
Why,
that.
why did she lead to that conclusion?
Well, the argument they're trying to make now is the old guilt by association. And we think back to, the nasty periods in American policy, American history, when Republicans were doing that to Democrats, particularly in Hollywood. Guilt by association.
Who did that?
Oh, McCarthy. All these people would say, oh, you're a filmmaker, you're associating with this actor, you must be a communist. Right. Guilt by association.
Right.
They're doing exactly the same thing now, with a far weaker case than I think can be made from the known public record. In one of the disturbing things you have in the Bill Clinton history is, think of the number of people that were in the United Kingdom with Bill Clinton at a time when the Russians, clearly the Soviet Union, had actively infiltrated Oxford and Cambridge and the London School of Economics and that whole group, exactly when Bill and Ira Magaziner and Strobe Talbot and a whole bunch of other people were there, and Bill actually travels to the Soviet Union in 1969 or 70 or whenever it was, spends time there. Ira Magaziner and he are very actively involved in the anti-Vietnam War movement in Europe, which was definitely infiltrated by the Soviet Union. And you're going to have the nerve to say that, because Robert Mueller has now had, I don't know how many months it is, it's probably 20 months or so, in an investigation that was set up, in theory, to find Russian collusion, right? You don't have anything
Which is
to do,
not even a crime.
Which is not a crime. Nothing to do with that. Now we're going to make the case that, Donald Trump is, has got bad friends, and can you imagine what Vladimir Putin must have on Donald Trump? Imagine what the Soviet Union and the English and the Israelis, through Epstein and others, have on the Clinton family.
Right.
In Epstein Island.
I think on everybody. I think that's the way these things work, is they're just collecting information on everybody.
Right.
And Clinton was just super into doing extremely bad stuff.
As possibly may have been Magazine and others. I mean, I think the formula could well be, and you've talked about the skull and bones idea, that you get these striving people when they're in college, and college kids do the stupidest things.
Smart. Right.
Right. And you find those that really want to run the world at age 21 or 22. You get them into, as it were, a pickle, or somebody else thanked me for calling it a sticky wicket. And you take abundant pictures of that, and you encourage that person to then run for office, and you encourage that person to think that they can go, let's say, from being a minor state senator to being a junior senator from Illinois to being the first African American president. You let that person get to be president of the United States, and you let that person think that he, in the case of Obama, or she, in the case of Hillary, is going to be very comfortable inside the White House, and that's when the hammer drops, and the tough guys come either through a lawyer or some cutout and say, listen, yeah, you're going to be president of the United States, but you work for me.
Do you know Diana West, Charles?
I know of her, sure.
She was the guest on the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp the other night.
Really?
And it was really a great show, I have to say. I hope that people will sponsor the program by going to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth, and then they can watch this interview. But Diana West has written this book, American Betrayal, about the Soviet Union infiltrating the U.S. government.
Was she at Yale?
I don't know.
If we look her up, I think we might want to look her up. She could. There's another one, Diane West, who's different, but it's possible she was the one. There is somebody with a name like that who was in college with me, who was very well regarded. I'm sure it could be that person.
Very good. That would be interesting. Diana West, Yale. Yeah, she did go to Yale.
Yeah, she's after me.
Born 1961, according to Wikipedia.
Yeah. She's very famous.
Yep. It was an excellent interview, and she spoke about a lot of really interesting things that I had not heard about before. So anyway, perhaps we should remind people that this is the 138th show we've done together, Charles.
That's pretty good.
It might be the most shows I've done with anybody. I don't know.
Well, it's certainly, in my case, the most shows I've done with anybody.
Yeah. And we've got this handy repository where all of the shows are on the playlist here in the Jason Goodman YouTube channel. 16,500 views of the playlist. And the subscriber count is stubbornly stuck just shy of 80,000. We've heard a lot of talk about how YouTube is changing things about their, I don't know what, the algorithm, so that if you question the idiotic story of what happened on 9/11, you're relegated to the basement.
Maybe it would be in order to buy some AdSense ads.
What do you mean?
Maybe they're sending you a message that this is as far as you're going to go without, without paying. But once you pay, maybe the thing will rocket up.
Huh. I hadn't thought of that. It's possible. Right. But people can check out every episode of Sunday with Charles, as well as every episode of Charles Ortel is Closing In, by going to this playlist and watching it. I also would encourage people to subscribe to Crowdsource the Truth too. And we've just cracked 5,000 subscribers on Periscope. I don't understand why it's less than 1/12.
Because Jack Dorsey's got his, his high-heeled shoe.
Boot?
Right on the throat.
Can you goose step in high heels, Charles?
I wouldn't know.
Jack Dorsey will do it if you can. Beard and high heels. How are the shadow banning efforts going on Twitter?
I would guess, it seems that I'm back. I was up at 34.5, and then I went down to 34.3, and I don't even think that this is recent.
This is right now.
Really? Because I thought I had tweeted maybe more recently than 19 hours ago.
34.4. And of course, people can follow you there at Charles Ortel. You're tweeting today about Blasey Ford, which that's from the Federalist. I agree, something needs to happen. You can't just come out and make these ridiculous accusations and have nothing happen. I hope that people will also follow me on Twitter, where I can't seem to get past 24.6. Every time it goes up there, they knock it back down. So I don't know, maybe people are unsubscribing from these various things. I think most people don't want to waste the finger power to unsubscribe. But anything is possible, Charles. We can discuss that all day, but I think it's time for us to get right into your slide presentation.
Sure. So this is actually going to be, in length of slides is shorter, but it may take a full 2 hours to go through the detail, because what I tried to do this time to accommodate some of the people who may not be able to listen to the whole presentation is there's one crucial slide where I actually use sentences. So, and there are quite a few links on that slide. But the basic thing here, we have not spent a lot of time on the very important Brazilian angle.
It's very important.
In the Clinton Foundation. And that is that in Brazil, decades ago, Brazil was a poor country, but Brazil has really been in the middle class and even approaching upper middle class territory for a while. So it doesn't get the same kind of concessionary aid flows that it used to get. It made, 20 years ago, people used to say as a rule of thumb that if you can get gross domestic product per capita above 10,000, you're solidly on the track to becoming an advanced country in economic terms, in terms of economic output. And Brazil got to that place a while ago. So you're sitting, that's good news. On the one hand, your private sector is resuscitated and you've got hope, but you're competing against the global giants, the US and Japan and China and elsewhere, and now you've been cut off from these massive flows. So I believe that the good people of Brazil, and in particular some of the people who there are a number of very good people who are involved in UNITAID, one of them whom is from Brazil, understood a lot more about the AIDS crisis than people in the United States did. We took a position under Bill Clinton and Al Gore, and arguably one could say correctly, that our pharmaceutical giants had invested a lot of money, in theory, to develop these anti-retroviral HIV drugs. And the price level that had been set for those drugs inside the United States and advanced countries was very high. And the crisis, the revelation under the Bill Clinton presidency was, well, wait a minute. If we set the drugs at, let's say, $10,000 per patient per year, that's going to cut out everybody in precisely the parts of the world where the crisis exists, in Africa and Asia and the poor countries there. So there's got to be a workaround here. We can't have tough protections for patents and at the same time bemoan the fact that people are going to die from HIV, which would accelerate into full-blown AIDS, people thought, far more rapidly than so far it has. So there was a big tension there.
I think that's also worth mentioning for people who maybe aren't familiar with Brazil. It's somewhat incongruent because it's a very religious country in general, very Catholic, but yet incredibly liberal sexually. People walking around on the beach basically naked, and lots of premarital sex, pretty common, teenage pregnancy, etc. So I would imagine, I don't know, I haven't seen the statistics or facts, but HIV is probably a pretty substantial problem in Brazil. Well,
so in terms of the number of cases it is, but as a percentage of the population it's not. And therein lies, as it were, the rub, that in Brazil and in the West, thinking about time now, the prevalence of HIV, the known prevalence of HIV and lumped in together with AIDS, and they're different. HIV is a precursor to full-blown AIDS. The known prevalence is actually quite low as a percentage of the population, contrasting it to countries like Lesotho and Swaziland and South Africa and places in Africa and others, where you can have a prevalence up at like 30%. It's down below, in Brazil I believe it's below 1%. In many countries in the West, it's 0.5%, 2%, et cetera. So the question arises, why in 2019 would we still be in a place having spent, close to $100 billion on improving health systems in these afflicted countries? Why would we still have such high prevalence of HIV and AIDS in Africa? It's a fair question. Now, Bill Clinton, in this book I was mentioning, and elsewhere, in his post-presidency period, after he found religion, because he really did, the Clinton administration really made it, they actually sued South Africa to stop them from allowing the South African generic companies to copy the branded American and Western versions of these antiretrovirals. Our government, arguably, some might say, exacerbated the HIV/AIDS problem in South Africa and in those countries that wanted to break the patents by suing those countries and stopping them and joining them from doing that. So, there's a history we really need, if we want to get into this, and not getting back into the, say, late 80s and early 90s in that period, I would say with, due deference to the scientists and the doctors, nobody really knew. We knew it was a problem. I think the wider world was very scared of it, but nobody really had the answers. Certainly not the level of answers that we may have today about how to attack it. And we need, with the benefit of hindsight and forgetting this idea that, it's only progressives who can see truth clearly about this issue and all conservatives are evil and don't understand the problem. No, we have a long period of history here. Do we understand precisely how HIV turns into full-blown AIDS? Do we understand the fact, well yet, that the conditions that would give rise to a diagnosis of HIV/AIDS positive might also be conditions that would give rise to a diagnosis of a related disease or even an unrelated disease that might kill you more quickly? Do we understand just how far down the totem pole the health systems are outside the United States? We've got trouble here, but in countries where you've got no electricity, no roads, population dispersed much more broadly, no education, no clean water, I could go on and on, no doctors, no hospitals.
That's a little bit worse.
Yeah, it's just a tad worse, So do we understand the gap and, and the best way of trying to close that gap? And have we thought through properly what might happen should resources be allocated to try to close that? Do we have the resources on the planet to try to close that gap? But anyway,
the gap, Charles.
Exactly. But the thesis that we're going to explore here is whether the Brazilians weren't a lot more devious and the George Bush and the Clinton Foundation people and others a lot less smart than they thought they were in attacking this HIV.
I can guarantee before you read another sentence that George W. Bush was a lot less smart.
Well, and also our Magaziner and Bill Clinton. You see,
also not that smart.
Well, not sufficiently suspicious about what was going on. I mean, it sounds here in America, and we spend, I think, people donate on average. The last time I looked at the figures, it was between $200 billion and $300 billion a year is given by people to charity every year. It's a lot of money.
How much of that is stolen by unscrupulous charities?
Probably a third, as a bet.
Wow.
As a bet. Because probably the real number is higher than 200, and then, whatever. The math is probably, I'm just giving a, guess.
Charles, I'm sorry to take you off on a tangent, but it's important and it speaks to what you're talking about. And I was just thinking the other day, instead of taxing people 70% and all this stuff, am I wrong to say that there's probably so much waste and graft within what we're already doing that if they did nothing but concentrate on efficiency and eliminating theft, we would unlock untold riches?
Right. Well, yeah. That's just, people laugh at you when you bring that up in Washington D.C. because it's
because you're messing with their money.
Exactly. You're talking about my kids here. But
no, we like graft.
But people on the right and the left have talked about eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, and
right.
You always get that. And then the reason that never happens is there's never put enough teeth into.
Well, they just kill the people who want to do that.
They never put enough. Look at the Clinton Foundation. I mean, it's the biggest obvious fraud. is plain as the the bulbous nose on Bill Clinton's face. It's just
it's red,
right? You don't need to bring any cocaine next to it to make it turn redder. I mean, it's just obvious this is a massive fraud, and yet no attorneys general are doing. The FBI is not doing anything. You're going to send 29 people into armed agents in to lasso Roger Stone out from his Fort Lauderdale house or apartment, but they're not going to seemingly do anything about.
That's got to be reddened.
Yeah, but they're not going to do anything about this massive fraud. So that at least they have not yet done anything overt that we know about yet in terms of indictments and convictions and all that. So the thesis we're going to explore here, the working hypothesis, is that the Brazilians noticed this fraud, and they waited until they got the Clintons in a position and the Obamas in a position where they could hold up the large network of UN and Global Fund and unregulated globalist schemes, and they inserted themselves into this UNITAID project, which really came way after the fact. UNITAID were
elements of the Brazilian government inserted themselves.
Yeah, and they decided to be a founding member of UNITAID in 2006. Prior to 2006, in 2002, Global Fund got created. By 2005, the Global Fund had given many billions of dollars towards this approach. PEPFAR had allocated $15 billion, then another $25 billion.
Does everybody know what PEPFAR is?
It's the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. It was announced on June 27, 2003 by George W. Bush. The announcement of his shocked a lot of people because the last thing they expected out of George W. Bush was a commitment of that level of funding. That was a gigantic amount in contrast, when Bill Clinton, I think in his final year as president, we allocated $150 million towards HIV, international HIV.
And what did PEPFAR do?
$15 billion over 5 years.
Where did that go?
It went, well, nobody really knows is part of the problem, but it went, nobody, the problem is, as I said, they allocate it, they say that, we need this money to buy drugs and health systems. And
okay.
Yeah, okay.
Buy drugs.
And then,
sounds like a Bill Clinton plan.
Exactly, and then you say, all right, how are we going to figure out what happened to the money? Well, it's simple. You just get on a plane, get your Ebola vaccine. Oh, there's none of that. Get a rental car.
Isn't there an Ebola vaccine?
I don't think there is one. I could be wrong. Go down in Democratic Republic of Congo and get your Avis car and drive, 1,800 miles into no car, no road. Well, make sure that you have the medicine all cool, no electricity. Find the people who that's impossible. They're spread out all over the place. And watch out for the landmines, and watch out for the warring factions, and watch out for the fact that they're obviously going to be able to tell right away that you're not from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and umpty-ump other countries like it. So it sounds like a great idea.
No, it doesn't.
It sounds compassionate to say, we have an
I
economy.
Thought you going and looking for the
money. No, but we have an economy of 20 trillion. What's 15 billion? We're producing 20 trillion a year. We'll throw 15 billion of breadcrumbs on the water, hope it, helps people out. But really, you go back again through this history, and I'm writing about this and studying it carefully, and hopefully I'm not going to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but I might travel around to some places. In South Africa, Bill Clinton ridiculed the leader of South Africa at the time in 2000, I think 1 through 3, for basically making the argument I'm making slightly different. Now, he got in trouble because his health ministry was saying, AIDS, you can cure that by just taking chicken soup or something. It was
what?
They had some people who were, on outer space talking about it. But the essence of this guy's objection was the resource objection, that we don't actually yet, if you want us to try to improve the health of our people, let's get some electricity going, let's get some roads, let's get some hospitals. How about a few doctors, not robot doctors or real nurses, and how about some hospital beds, and how about, it's not like you go, even in the United States, it's not like you go to somebody who's diagnosed HIV positive and you say, throw me a bone, here's a pill. I mean, there's a lot more to that. There's related symptoms. You have to be very careful reading the literature. When you give somebody, depending on whether it's a man, a woman, their ethnicity.
It's not a Tylenol.
Yeah, you can have multiple things that are a problem, and giving this one type of HIV/AIDS medicine can trigger a very tough reaction for some other things. So you really need to have
close
actual
supervision of a doctor.
Yeah, not the 13 Crackberry crowd, our magaziner and Bill Clinton running around chasing hookers and flying all over the place and talking about climate change one day and AIDS the next day and obesity the day after that, and then helping Hillary get elected. I mean, that's not the type of thing you need to address these types of vexing problems in Africa and in sub-Saharan Africa, and especially in the subcontinent in Asia. So on the one hand, this was a classic prescription for fraud in my mind, where you have a problem about which you can launch these heart-rending appeals that will cause rivers of money to flow your way, and then the certainty that you're trying to do this in the most crooked places on earth, and you're not talking about, you know, throwing out $100,000, you're talking about throwing out $100 billion, maybe over time even more than that. So around all that, why is it, you know, we get all these high and mighty people in the media lecturing us about dumb Republicans, and, you know, when they want to debate you, it's like, whatever you're for, you know, the counter argument is, I'm not for that, I'm for the smart solution. You know, that's your solution by definition, you're a conservative Republican, which I'm not, but you know, that's a dumb idea. So anything I want to do is smart, anything you want to do is dumb. How come all these people are so freaking smart on paper, you know, and then got involved in professions like being accountants and lawyers where you are regulated, and consultants where to date there is no regulation, and I think there should be, or at least there should be penalties for using consultants as money launderers.
Tigers.
How did all these very smart people, you know, high and mighty people trying to save the world, get involved channeling so much cash? And we're talking about hundreds and hundreds, maybe billions of dollars via the Clinton Foundation related ways. How did they get involved with the scheme for so long? And why is it that, you know, nobody in Washington, D.C. wants to clean up the do-gooders?
Well, Charles, that's obviously racist.
No, cleaning up the yeah, exactly. So anyway, here we are on January 27th, 2019. If we go to the next page, we just quickly cover the fact that this is a different approach, and I'm having a good time now talking with more and more people. I tend to meet new people every day now, and explaining to them that, you know, Jason, this was your idea, crowdsourcing the truth, that you're going to actually get to the truth if you follow this course by engaging as many people as you are now engaging. We're going to crack through the 79,000. Might be more than that, could be a lot more than that in time. But 79,000 people is a lot of people.
I think there's something going on. I mean, we've heard about a lot of people who buy YouTube subscriptions and manipulate them, and I think that they might, there was some point in time where like 1,000 or 4,000, somebody made a video accusing me of buying the subscribers, that like sometime back in 2017 there was a day where 4,000 subscribers arrived. I didn't know anything about that, but I agree, it seems not natural. Somebody must have injected those 4,000 viewers, perhaps to, you know, strategically suck them out at certain times. I don't know why they would do that, but
this is a different approach than you're going to find on what is left of the lamestream media, and it's what we're really trying to do, and it's working, is to stay focused, because we don't. I cannot get distracted into many different things at once. I've got to pick one big. This is a pretty big challenge, and stay focused on it. Get it out there. Get people to consider it. Thank you for doing this with me and promoting it and getting so many people to look at it. And we're starting to see people not just listen, but actually initiate actions. I'm not going to get into what they're doing, but there are ways in which members of the crowd watching what we've done can approach the authorities. There are lots of authorities here. There's attorneys general in every state in this country.
Postal inspectors.
There's postal inspectors. There are licensing boards, bar associations, counting board. There are all sorts of things that can be notified of these transgressions. And beyond that, of course, there's the FBI.
They don't seem to be doing anything.
And then there are foreign entities that really should be quite concerned about this. And I think eventually what will happen, we're beginning to see that in the academic literature, starting about a good 20 years ago, people began questioning why it is such a safe assumption that these do-gooder associations are actually doing good. I mean, this Lindsay McCooey wrote a book more recently than that, No Such Thing as a Free Gift. But there's long been this suspicion, frankly. I mean, some people who are out there on past the frontier, Maxine Waters being one of them, that maybe she's the one who accuses the CIA of trying to kill people in Africa by spreading AIDS.
I mean, that might be the one thing she says that I would be inclined to agree with. Right,
but there have been a lot of, going back to and we can argue whether it was conscious or unconscious, the spreading of diseased blankets by the conquistadors and others. The
weaponization of anthrax that was given to Saddam Hussein that required the development of a new anthrax vaccine that many people attribute to the Gulf War syndrome that so many veterans suffer with.
Right, and so it is I think a fair and responsible thing to question, particularly given both the amount of money absolutely that has been spent by the U.S. and other donor countries, but now also considering the fact that we've run our debt up to a place that's so high that we're not actually in the business. We shouldn't be in the business of saying, we don't need to pay down our debt. We'll just blow more money on programs that get Bill Clinton and his cronies and Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein and a whole bunch of other people, more advantages they don't richly deserve. Yeah. So this is a program, hopefully, of continuing interaction. We are going to always, as always, provide you with a list of links. Today we have some special links buried into this presentation that are really worth, if your investigators are listening, members of the FBI if you're listening, maybe you haven't been able to find this evidence yet, it's out there in the public domain, we're going to show it to you.
So they're busy earning overtime, kicking in the door at Roger Stone's house. Charles, in contrast to your laser beam focus, I'm here to be ADD and bring up random stuff to hopefully make people laugh. But along those lines, UFC NHL, which I presume is a Canadian person who enjoys the Ultimate Fighting Championship, is asking me if you, Charles, know about the U.S. reliance on China for generic drugs. I suppose you probably do.
I do, yeah. So there's something called an API, active pharmaceutical ingredient, which is like the engine of a car, the engine of a pill. And for antiretroviral HIV...
It's called the API because that's also an application programming interface for software. And it's the same kind of thing.
Okay. So for HIV antiretroviral drugs, the active pharmaceutical ingredients that are used in generics are principally manufactured in China and India.
Interesting. I remember you saying something about Ramboxy with that.
Right, and Matrix as well.
Enter the Matrix, Charles.
Yeah. So Donald Trump has, I think, correctly been banging the drum here on this double standard in the way in which Roger Stone was treated versus comparing that to Clinton, comparing that to Obama. And I think it's worth putting this Examiner story out there. I don't think we're in a place where we want to say, there's a whole bunch of kids playing out, in the schoolyard, and 65% of them are, breaking all the rules, and so one kid gets caught, and the other kid says, well, what about Tommy over there? And what about Susan?
Probably wearing a MAGA hat.
Right, exactly. But that's really not the issue. I think the issue should be, and if we go back to the core concern that I think correctly got people agitated about what was going on in the 2016 election, is it possible, one asks, for a national election to be rigged in the United States of America? Because if in this day and age, if it's possible, shame on the authorities for allowing that to happen. Now, that when that question came up and when it looked like Hillary Clinton was going to walk, she'd rigged the primaries, so we knew the answer to the primaries, but when it looked like she was going to win, Professor Obama got out there and lectured everybody many times on the campaign trail, saying, "Of course, it's impossible to rig a national election. I mean, it's impossible."
What does that even mean?
Exactly right. But when he said that a few times, just the way he would always get you to shut up, kid. I'm the president. You're not. Just go away. But I mean, if what our concern here is that the 2015-16 election cycle, and maybe the 11 and 12 election cycle, and maybe, who knows, the 7 and 8 election cycle, were rigged, that's a fair inquiry. And we shouldn't be focused on Russia alone. We should be focused on other nations that may have been involved. And in particular, we should be focused upon, if we were so freaking concerned about the election having been rigged, why is it that James Comey and the FBI did not demand to see the DNC servers?
Yeah.
Why didn't that happen?
Because it's much better to have former FBI agent who left to start a company called CrowdStrike that can contract to the FBI to waste a lot of money and produce a bad result. And this goes back to exactly what I'm saying, Charles. Ocasio-Cortez's speech about her suffering constituents, the Yemeni immigrant who is an air traffic controller at JFK Airport, that raised the question in my mind of why are air traffic controllers federal employees? And I remembered when I was a kid, Ronald Reagan broke the air traffic controllers union strike by firing them all and nationalizing that position, which may have been, presidential discretion at the time may be necessary. We talk about that. I'm sure there's a lot I don't know about it. But today, it doesn't seem right that air traffic controllers should be employed by the federal government. The pilots on the planes aren't. And worse, I saw a press release from Serco in 2010 that they're contracting to the FAA to provide the air traffic controllers. So it's got all the worst aspects of it being a federal position and all the worst aspects of it being private business, because we've got a private British company contracting to the government to provide these workers. They should all be fired. That should be taken off the taxpayer's bill, and it should be a private company that's employing these air traffic controllers.
Private companies, maybe. And the same thing with airports. Why should they be under government control? Maybe they should be private contractors. Or what about the food contracting firms, which are controlled by, I believe, Middle East interests?
Wow.
And you think about, what's an obvious way to get something that shouldn't be on a plane?
The food.
The food. And the drink.
None of that should be on the plane.
Right, exactly. But so there's a clear double standard here in sending so many people in against Stone, deciding that what could possibly have happened. You think during the election period when before Comey said that why he was given the role of saying that no reasonable prosecutor would take the email mishandling case. Before then, Obama gave at least one interview where he said that Hillary, there's no way that she had the requisite intent. She may have made a mistake, but there's no way. How does the President of the United States, in the middle of an ongoing FBI investigation, say something like that, and there's no special prosecutor for him? Yeah. Whereas, on thin ground, we haven't seen the memo that relates to, how this Mueller investigation actually came. But we can't see that. But, and Donald Trump he can't say anything about it. He can't have his people in. He's got to put up with this drip torture forever, and we do too. And no one gets to ask the question of, now wait a minute, why is it in the interest of the United States to ratchet up tensions with a nuclear armed power in Russia that has an aggressive air force and other capabilities? Nobody gets to ask that question. So, I mean, this is just, we're watching the double standard drama play out daily. And then we have from this, this is going to be a nasty comment, but I'll make it anyway, Debbie Wasserwoman Schultz. I mean, this is ridiculous. For her to be given an opportunity to go on CNN, well, I guess that's not much of an opportunity, and to say, Roger Stone weaponized intel stolen by Putin. Well, how do you know it was stolen? You're the one who hired the Awan people who tried to cover that up. We don't really know that this information yet. No, we haven't seen any evidence, facts, those things that are kind of useful. You can't just be morally correct in your argument here because you're, Debbie Wasserwoman Schultz. Where's the proof that this, as concerns the Podesta emails, that stuff was hacked? Maybe it was leaked. It's far more likely to be that it was leaked. I'm not an expert on the subject, but... Didn't
John Podesta say Eric Braverman is the leaker?
I did. I think he did. And to say, let's see, that implies that it was a leak, not a hack.
Yeah, and then we've had people who have said that the speed, you know, Bill Binney and his team said the speed at which it was downloaded determines that it happened locally. But then I saw somebody else who raised the point that that's actually incorrect. And I think I agreed with that somebody else. So, I don't know, there's a lot of things here that confuse and complicate the situation. But for her to be saying what's happened here, I don't know.
Especially when we think back, we brought it up before, you know, somebody who's, you know, you had the picture of one of the Kavanaugh accusers, Blasey Ford or whatever, you know, and who was the Blasey Ford? Yeah, who was the genius who sat on top of the revelations on Blasey Ford? None other than Diane, I hire only Chinese spies, Feinstein, who had, you know, a Chinese spy.
Amazing. Look at that, Charles.
Yeah. It's like a Ouija board.
Praise the Lord. She's like summoning a higher power. Help me lie convincingly.
Yeah, but no, Diane Feinstein. When did she become the arbiter of, you know, moral exactitude? When she's the one whose husband is a major investor, whose husband's been benefiting while she's been a senator. You trace those relationships, you know, it certainly would seem to me to be rich fodder. Yeah, you're doing Diane Chi-Fi?
Yeah.
Rich fodder for possible corruption investigation. This person is, you know, throwing shade at Donald Trump. Mm. You know, and which is the bigger threat? I mean, they're both threats, and if the Chinese are interfering in our elections, and the Russians are interfering in elections, shame on both the countries, and we'll punish both countries.
What about Democrats interfering with the election?
They rigged the election.
Yeah.
Tried to.
So it's interfering, isn't it?
That's rigging.
Oh.
So this is, Dick Morris has these daily lunch notes.
He's quite good.
These are quite good. This one is all about, you know, right away get an advertising thing, but we don't need to play it. But this is all about, very interesting. He's saying in this recent lunch alert that uranium-1, and specifically the fact that William Campbell came forward because he knew of and could tie the Clinton Foundation and the Clintons to pay to play via uranium-1 and the trucking thing. He's talking about a $100 million bribe here. And Dick, you know, I've actually been in touch with you. I want to remind you, you say this is by far and away the biggest contribution to the Clinton Foundation, the stuff that came down from Canada. You're wrong, dude. $650 million came from UNITAID. It's in their books. We're going to show you yet again, some of the flows that came from 7, 8, and 9, 297 million. That's 3 times what you're getting concerned about here. We need to be concerned about both things. But the sum and substance of what Dick talks about here is get ready. Unless the hearings are canceled, this guy Campbell will be testifying shortly.
Ooh, wow.
And that will, you know, connect a bunch of dots and explode on the Clintons' faces. Let's hope.
Exploding is something you generally don't want.
Yeah. So I was on Monday, I went out to Astoria and I went on Press TV, and I want to just remind people that we have brewing tensions here over the election. I'm not sure exactly the date in Israel. I think it might be in April. But there was a thesis the Iranians were trying on for size with me that what Netanyahu is doing here with these bombings is he's just doing it to win votes inside Israel to prove he's tough. Which I disabuse the people on, and I actually have to say that I enjoy trying to defend my point of view on something like a Russian state TV or a Iranian.
Well, why is Netanyahu bombing Syria? And a lot of people have said that Trump announced this pullout from Syria basically as some kind of a trick to just have, you know, Israel stand in for the United States and do these bombings.
No, what I pointed out to the Iranian government on their television, I said, you know, look, if you don't want Israel to bomb Syria, you might refrain from having military advisors in Syria and having the leader of your country. I said this on Iranian television. Probably that's why there's a sniper over there. But no. And you might want to refrain from having the leader of your country, you know, chant regularly, "Death to Israel, death to Israel. We're going to blow you off the face of the earth." I think
Scott Bennett told me that he did not encounter that when he was in Iran.
What, was he there recently?
He was.
Really? What was he doing?
Well, he was there as part of some delegation to stop the U.S. from having a war with Iran. You know, what's his name? Mr. Mustache, John Bolton. Yeah, seems to want nothing more than to destroy Iran. And Scott is under the impression that, much like with Libya, a lot of what we've been told about Iran is not necessarily true, and the United States has been meddling there for some time. Certainly the whole deal with the Shah and the Ayatollah.
Well, so I think I've been talking about this and doing interviews on it. I mean, I think there's no question that the Iranian people and the American people, speaking broadly and generally about both peoples, have much in common, and we have much to learn from the Iranian people and from Iranian civilization, which predates American civilization by millennia.
Yeah, wow.
And certainly the food is quite good over there too, which is my judge of whether you have civilization. But anyway,
how do you explain England?
Food's pretty good in Portugal.
Now it is, but that's just a recent.
No, it was good in the '80s if you knew where to go.
Okay.
Back in the '70s and the '60s, well, I first went there in '76 and it was garbage. But getting off point a little bit. So the point I was trying to make is that the situation is not only volatile in the region in Syria and in Israel, but what we're stoking ourselves up for here is a big war, a proxy war, maybe a wider war between Iran and the Gulf states, in which we would side with the Gulf states and Israel, and something like that under the present conditions of low oil prices, which are very harmful to the Gulf states and to Iran and to Russia and to other places, does, to me, pose a mounting geopolitical set of threats that I would urge. This is not a time right now to be taking highly leveraged speculative bets on overvalued companies. I think you could watch something come, a black swan event could land in the Middle East very quickly.
What do you mean, black swan event?
Most swans are white, but you don't want World War III to start in the Middle East, but next thing you know, something happens all of a sudden.
I don't think we want it to start anywhere, but okay, I got it.
Yeah, and I don't know if people have been noticing, I remember when Trump won, and immediately the fashionistas all said, well, we're not going to dress Melania Trump. She'll have nothing to wear for the, I remember all that stuff. Yeah, that worked. And they started making these snide comments about her, and I've noticed, this is, I think, the second time I've noticed that she has won a defamation case.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, against Daily Telegraph, and I have to say, I like her approach. It must be very difficult to be the wife of Donald Trump, because for obvious and sundry reasons, and it must be very difficult, particularly with her only son with Donald Trump is, I guess, 12 or 13, which is a delicate age for kids. And they go from the fishbowl of celebrity in New York, but now they're living in D.C., the global fishbowl, and who knows what crap he's taken in school, and just to do all this. I admire the way in which she's conducting herself and trying to make progress with the initiatives. Anti-bullying, I think, is an excellent thing to pick.
I wonder, will she meet with the Catholic school MAGA hat kid?
If there is a presidential...
Because he's been bullied.
There's no question about it. They'll continue to bully.
And then, Charles, we've heard a lot. I think most of the people who have brought it up have been doing it to kind of insult him, but there's been speculation that Barron Trump might be autistic. Do we know anything about that? Because that would certainly... Yeah,
I don't know anything at all about that. I think we should not really get into details on him. But
just asking.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think it is... I just remember when my own kids went through that age. That's, you're approaching 8th grade, and then there you've got to make a decision about are you going to boarding school or private school or whatever.
He probably doesn't care that his father is the president. He's just annoyed that he's got to stand around and be patient.
That's right. Well, yeah, I mean, you're just beginning the coming of age process. It's just a delicate moment, and so I have to say I admire the approach that the Trumps, and in particular Melania, are taking, and I think that people who believe that Melania Trump is an idiot are themselves very stupid.
Yeah. And Barron also looks like a perfect balance between him and her.
Yeah. So now to turn on the clown show, which is a consideration of this circus, this developing circus, the American Thinker one. Yeah, I mean,
the mouse is gone again from there.
Here it was only January 27th, 2009. We had at the beginning of last week, Kamala Harris announced that she was going to run for president, and you had these swooning, boneheads in the mainstream press and CNN, MSN. She's the front runner. Get used to saying these words, President Kamala Harris. And the degree to which the circular firing squad on the left is going to be firing at what. Here we have, Kamala Harris. There are some who forget the issue of whether she in fact had an affair with this very powerful mayor.
Pretty smart of him to come out and brag about it right away.
I mean, she's had a week to be, run her campaign, and her former, quotes, mentor is saying this kind of crap about her. And, people are just going to get
that's
into it.
So outrageous. He's like, yeah, I slept with her. He's just coming out.
And I gave her a whole bunch of jobs. Like,
oh, God.
I mean, it's like, this is, you take a step back. What's that?
That's a circular firing squad.
There you go. But you take a step back, and it used to be there was this concept of who had presidential timber. I mean, who was somebody who could, on the strength of, solid accomplishments, decide that he or she might enter the race. And, with no respect whatsoever to Kamala Harris, just looking at her role as Attorney General of California, where she sat atop and failed to prosecute the Clinton Foundation frauds, even though I contacted their office many different times and different reasons. This is somebody who has precious little in the way of accomplishment to maybe aspire to keep her term as a first-term senator. She's been a senator for, what, a couple of years?
I don't know.
Yeah, not very long, and doesn't have much by way of legislative accomplishments. I have to say, I think there are few examples, maybe you can think of them, of senators who end up making great presidents. People will debate whether Lincoln was a great president, but they're very few. And we're now right into it. We've got people deciding that they can be president because for whatever reason.
With Willie Brown.
We've got Howard Schultz, the Starbucks guy, has decided that he's going to run as an independent.
The CEO of Starbucks.
The guy who is he still the CEO?
Well, he was at one point, right?
Yeah, but he was. I think he got in some trouble, or he got frowned upon, or whatever.
For the
so
Christmas
we
cup?
have that. We got to put up with that for who knows how much longer. We have the world's palest fake Indian, Elizabeth Warren, arguing that there should be a wealth tax. Now, and that article in the National Review is worth clicking if it can come up. But the argument it makes is a scholarly counter saying that you can't really have a tax on assets. It's a forfeiture if you do that. And that pointing out correctly that the income tax was one thing that was specifically prohibited by the founders, and Lincoln snuck one in, and it went to the Supreme Court, and they had to get an amendment ultimately to get it done. But I will say here that, and I've said it on my website, in no way am I in favor of yet another new classes of tax, another new class of taxes rather, absent some kind of a grand bargain. But when you look at the fundamental trade-off that in economics that I see in all this, with this expansive government, is expansive government gets funded when you have inflation, when you devalue the dollar. People say, well, we'll have benign inflation. Don't you worry about it. We make a trade where we have some way of having sound money. We rein in, we crack and restructure and disrupt the way in which government services are delivered to avail ourselves of the benefit, not simply of fraud, waste, and abuse, but of advancing technology and other schemes. You do a deal like that, maybe you get rid of public sector unions, which are, I think, not needed in this environment. And to get all that to work, you come up with a scheme of, quote, voluntary contributions fixed for a number of years, so it's not like for the rest of your life you're going to give up 5% of your wealth every year. you could well see wealthy people looking at that. Many wealthy people are in favor of these 70% income taxes.
Why?
Because people aren't thinking clearly. If you're Warren Buffett, his annual income is very low. He'll pay 70% on $1 million so that you don't tax his $100 billion of wealth, right?
Oh, so it's not income, it's stuff that he owns that's...
Right, he doesn't pay dividend on Berkshire Hathaway, right? So the value of his stock holdings is going up every year by billions, tens of billions, because he doesn't need extra money. His income is maybe $1 million, $2 million a year. He'll pay 70% on that if his...
How could it be only $1 million or $2 million?
Because he's by design pays himself very little so that he can say to all the people, I only make X, Y, Z, you shouldn't make that much.
But then every $700 breakfast is what, a business expense?
He could, I think he's playing the capital game, but most people, probably 90% of this country does not have a financial, just considering their financial assets and their mortgage as part of that, does not have a positive financial net worth. So most people, you care about the income taxes that you pay on your income. But if you're wealthy, your wealth could well be 100 times your income, could be 1,000 times your income. So you're
money
very,
you already have.
Yeah, so you're very happy to pay 70% so that people don't look over here at your wealth, And I'm not in favor of taxing unrealized gains, but of course we'll get, I'm sure AOC and lunacy, the lunacy wing of the Democratic Party will soon get in this idea of, the rich, each year the value of their assets goes up and they choose not to sell them. They shouldn't be allowed to have, that's a taxable expenditure. They shouldn't be allowed to have that happen. They should pay a tax on their net worth, as calculated, whether they sell stuff or not. You're going to see people go down into that, conundrum.
Why is a diner waitress qualified to calculate or weigh in on any of this?
Well, I am hoping, maybe as that long-awaited sequel to the first animation we did, we do have some ideas for that diner waitress. So here's a Cato organization. People will say that's left wing and this and that, and right wing rather. Cato organization is a very thoughtful piece. $22 trillion is what we have by way of government debt right now.
Wow.
That excludes the present value of liabilities for employee retirement payments and other things like that. It excludes corporate debt and household debt and all kinds of other debt. The United States of America, people in it, have become very comfortable borrowing a lot more money to fund their lifestyles and their existence than people do in many other countries in the world. That picnic was not going to last forever. The ants have gathered around the tablecloth on the outside of the dessert tray in the center of the tablecloth. And interest rates are already going up. They may not continue soaring at the same percentage increases that we've seen, but a $22 trillion debt eventually has to be repaid. We just can't keep it out there. It's higher than it should be. And these politicians, AOC and others who keep talking about, we could afford $33 trillion for this, or we could afford this, they haven't a clue what they're talking about. And one thing that they shouldn't be allowed to get away with, Roosevelt back in the day could get away with saying, our country is better than this, we should spend on this and we should spend on that, because the size of government spending was minuscule. Well, we're spending $7 trillion a year right now on government. $7 trillion. That's way too much. There may be 2 or 3 countries in the world out of 200 have total economic output of $7 trillion per year. So the problem is not, you said fraud, waste, and abuse. The problem is not, we need this new program and that new idea. $7 trillion is more than enough. If you don't like, we should be getting the $7 trillion down to 6.2 or 6.5 trillion. And then once you do that, you should be able to really attack the con artists and fraudsters and scammers who, for example, are looting the American taxpayer to send money to the Global Fund.
And Charles, people in the comments will be very angry with me if I don't ask you about Catherine Austin Fitts and her ongoing campaign to raise awareness about the missing $21 trillion, which I must say is remarkably close to that number.
Yeah. So I know when I knew her, she called herself Austin. She worked at Dillon Reed with me, and she's a number of years ahead of me in the pecking order. She has had a career in government. She I think she had a high position.
HUD, right?
At HUD. She didn't run it. She was a senior position there, but her specialty was public finance, government finance. And she's a hard worker. She has her perspectives. I'm not sure I have seen proof of the $21 trillion number or 22, whatever she's talking about. She has a number of very good ideas and a number of ideas I disagree with. So we'll fly through these final three things and then we'll get into the guts here. Robots. You talk about robots. You know a lot about robots. This I thought was funny. That at Davos with the 13 Crackberry crowd, they get there, they probably had to pay $15 for a latte and it got served to them by a robot.
Oh, if Bill Clinton was there, they'd have to use sex robots, which is the other thing that's coming up in the news a lot lately. There was something talking about how, I think they made it legal in Japan for a human to marry a robot. They were anticipating the decline of, procreation. Obviously, these robots cannot.
Yet.
I don't know. That's crazy.
But I think, like anything else, the degree to which robots and advances in technology will replace human labor is not well understood. There's the benign theory is that, of course, these jobs that get taken over by robots, that's going to happen. But there'll be many more jobs for the people in the robot manufacturing
robots,
fixing robots. And I don't know that I believe that that's...
Well, because they'll just make a robot to fix the robots.
Exactly.
And I'm not joking about that.
I know.
That's kind of like the first robot they're going to make.
I know. And then this is a semi-humorous one. I mean, talking about how screwed up our country is the second to the last link.
Oops. Mm-hmm. Post is always good for a laugh.
She gets, they get into one hell of a fight or whatever, and she somehow slices her fiancé with a samurai sword, and her excuse in the court is, accidents happen.
Well, she just was sharpening the samurai sword and it went off.
It's just...
There was some other story about a woman or a transgender person on a Tinder date chopped the guy in the face with an axe. That's a bad date, Charles.
That would be bad. That's why one should not date strangers.
Yeah, near fatal injuries are.
And lastly, there is a rumor buzzing around the internet. I don't know if did you happen to watch this incident where Price Waterhouse flubbed the Oscars a couple of years ago?
I stopped watching the Oscars long ago, but I'm aware of...
This is a situation when, as I understand it, Price Waterhouse, which features in the Clinton Foundation alleged fraud conspiracy, the guys, the top accountants at Price Waterhouse, all they had to do was make sure that they maintain custody and control of the envelopes, who wins and who's the runner-up or whatever, and give the right envelope to the right, announcer or whatever. And the Price Waterhouse people were so, unfortunately, in a break, the chairman of Price Waterhouse, so you're listening to this, Eric Hansen, the chairman of Price Waterhouse tweets out, I just saw, one of these actresses, right?
Yeah. And then he screwed up.
And then he screws up.
Yeah, a little distracted.
Right. So anyway, they bounced, even the celebrities, they bounced Price Waterhouse out of there.
Will they be having Truman the Tiger count the results?
That could be what they're hoping for. Maybe BKD is resisting this series of programs because they really think that Eric Hansen will be able to bring his Truman the Tiger with him to the Oscars.
Yeah, if you really want to screw up your Oscar results, you got to get BKD involved.
Right. So with no further ado, we'll quickly now jump into a few interesting things.
Have some materially misleading Oscars.
Right. So a large number of things happened in 2006. We covered in a recent broadcast what happened in 2005. But in 2006, and it really began, right after Christmas, before New Year's Eve, the main Clinton Foundation in Arkansas filed these articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State of Arkansas. We have that document. We know that actually happened. And that document laid out a roadmap for how you were in theory going to merge this thing that we call Old Chi, this entity that was created 24th of March 2004 to fight HIV/AIDS internationally. It was going to be merged into the parent library complex in Little Rock by year end 2005. Importantly, key documents that are not on file there, but which we found, suggest that that Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc. would have been liquidated out of existence. So in other words, you say, you've got this thing over here, you've got the parent, we're going to put it in here, and then basta, it's gone. You know, you can't do anything. But there's a whole bunch of caveats. You and I, Jason, and the viewers, we can't enter into an agreement where we say, you know what we're going to do is, we're going to get into that. What's that movie, Breaking Bad?
Well, the TV show.
Yeah, TV show, Breaking Bad, Netflix series.
He was making crystal meth.
Yeah, we can't say, you know, let's have a formal agreement to make and distribute crystal meth from the playroom.
Sue somebody for breach of contract.
From the playroom down there, and you know, and we'll get it, and we'll store it in the locker room in this building, and we'll have the doormat, and we write this all up in an agreement. Yeah. You know, without understanding that you can't do that. And similarly, you can't merge Old Chi into the Clinton Foundation if the Clinton Foundation has no authority to do international work, and if Old Chi is not a federally tax-exempt charity. So yeah, they filed this fraudulent document on the 28th of December 2005, but it was an agreement to commit criminal conspiracy inside Arkansas and around the world. Nice. You know, it was not a very clever thing to do, which is why I keep dumping on Bruce Lindsay, who was the guy who was centrally involved, and dopey Andrew Kessel in this machination. If you're gonna commit crimes, I don't think you want to admit that in a document that is in the public domain that anybody who wants to spend time in this can find. So, you know, having done that, maybe going to a New Year's Eve party, Andrew Kessler says, you know what I'm going to do? Because I'm such an idiot. I'm going to take a form that is not the correct form. You have a special form you're supposed to use to apply for a fictitious name, which is a fictitious name is, you know, my real name of my foundation is the William J. Clinton Foundation, but I want to be able to operate the 42 Museum store in Little Rock. So I want to be able to say, when I do business in Arkansas, that I have this fictitious name, 42 Museum Store, that I will use maybe to get a bank account, maybe to interact with the public, maybe with stationery and advertising. You can do that in theory if the foundation is authorized to have a museum store, which I'm not sure it was. But you certainly cannot do that on the 3rd of January 2006 to say that you're going to operate Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative anywhere, because you have no authority to do that. You have probably been turned down. You filed a false and materially misleading application with the IRS in April 2004, which the IRS won't release because obviously it would incriminate a lot of people. You never got authority to do that, which is a material defect. So the Secretary of State of Arkansas should not let you try to do it under just a fictitious name. And even if the Secretary of State were inclined to let you do that, the only place you could try to do that by operation of this tactic is in the state of Arkansas. If you want to use a fictitious name in the United States, I'm told by lawyers, you've got to file, you've got to make sure that in every legal jurisdiction where you want to use that fictitious name, that you file a truthful application to do that.
When you say a fictitious name?
Doing business as.
Why is that fictitious?
Because that's not the real name in your articles of incorporation of your entity. The real name of the entity is the William J. Clinton Foundation.
Oh, because fictitious sounds like you're faking it.
Well, yeah. They like to use.
But DBA is a legitimate way to rename a business, isn't it?
But in the law, it's called a fictitious name. DBA is basically the same as a fictitious name. Huh. So you're not allowed to do any of this, right? But they go ahead and they do this, and they actually do it in multiple other states. Then on the 22nd of February 2006, and we have linked in here, but you don't have to pull it up, but for our viewers who want to check this, William Jefferson Clinton, who is not an executive, not a trustee, not a director, has no legal authority to do this, is in Sydney, Australia. Bit late, he missed the Australian Open, that would have been in Melbourne in January. But he signs this memorandum of understanding with who?
Probably
Alexander Downer.
Yeah.
Right? So Alexander Downer, and he had a few, put some shrimp on the Barbie, had a bunch of whatever they drink and smoke, and they signed this MOU, which is absurd. The document, actually, I'm going to contradict myself. Why don't we pull that MOU up and just show people for a second?
Right here?
This one here. And by the way, these are just a few of the things they did wrong in 2006. I mean, we don't have the time to go through everything. If you go down the page, you'll see, just exit out and just scroll down a little bit. You'll see it says, this is an agreement between the William J. Clinton Foundation and the Australian government. But then,
what's this all about?
Just going to X that one out and just keep going. The point of this is they use a whole bunch of different names. Some places it's here. Here, stop here. It says, whereas William J. Clinton has made the global battle against HIV/AIDS a major area of focus for his foundation. He's not an executive in the foundation. He's not a trustee in the foundation. He's not a director. He can't do that. But this is a legal document, in theory, that he signs in Sydney.
What was Downer's role in the Australian government at this moment?
He's a foreign minister of Australia.
What does that mean, though?
Secretary of State.
Huh.
It's a pretty senior job.
Yeah.
And he's given money to the Clinton Foundation. It says, mindful of the significant contribution that the Clinton Foundation's HIV/AIDS initiative. No, it's not. It's been liquidated on December 31st, 2005. I mean, it's like, did you do anything? This is the same Downer who is instigating the Mueller, character assassination and jailing.
Remind everybody what Alexander Downer did with that. He met with Papadopoulos?
In a wine bar. By accident, of course. Nobody put him up to it. He meets in 2016, and second quarter 2016, he meets Papadopoulos in a wine bar, and somehow becomes very concerned about what Papadopoulos and Trump may be doing. So he alerts the FBI, and that instigates eventually the Mueller probe.
So Alexander Downer has some drinks with this guy Papadopoulos who does nothing for Trump, really.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, I mean, there are plenty of very accomplished young people, but I don't think George Papadopoulos is one of them. And, how we can decide that, first of all, what was at this point, he's the High Commissioner, the ambassador for Australia to the UK. What was he doing in the wine bar? Why was he striking up a conversation with George Papadopoulos? Was that, whose idea was that? Did Papadopoulos contact Downer, or did Downer somehow, was this a meeting that was set up by perhaps Brennan and others to try to create the argument, the so-called predicate, for the Crossfire Hurricane and then whatever became the Mueller investigation? But if you're going to study Downer, you're going to study this Mueller investigation collusion, you've got to get behind this, and you've got to understand and question the motives of people like Downer.
This guy, Papadopoulos, he's just a campaign aide. He's really young. It's almost like they just who's the most...
Right. Mikey doesn't like it.
Who's the dumbest guy who's connected to the campaign that we could lure with a free glass of wine?
Yeah, I don't know if he's dumb or not. He's not that experienced. And again, what we're trying to do, we're jumping around here a little bit, but when we examine the question of collusion, we should be examining senior level. I mean, you can have minor figures get crosswise in something and get off in a place where far away from what the candidate and the management of the campaign know about, judging by business, right? You can have a large company where there's people over in some subsidiary in France doing something you didn't know about, and you can't be held completely responsible as the CEO, or in Trump's case, the equivalent of the CEO. He wouldn't know everything that's going on in every aspect of his campaign. But just getting back into the thing, if we just quickly scroll down, you'll see that this is, on the second page, you'll see that Bill Clinton himself signs this thing on the 22nd of February. There it is, William J. Clinton in Sydney. It's not even, at this point, the name of the foundation is the uppercase, not lowercase, William J. Clinton Foundation, and there is no HIV/AIDS initiative. There is no such thing. So, I don't know whether Australian law is tighter than American law. Some countries actually hold memoranda of understanding to be legally enforceable, even if they're not written down. Finland is one such country, or was one such country. So I don't know if this is a tight and binding agreement. Under U.S. law, it would not be, I don't think. But nonetheless, where's the documentation for who at the board of the William J. Clinton Foundation authorized Bill Clinton to do this? Where's the minute? Why didn't they change the Articles of Incorporation? Why didn't they discuss anything in their 990 for 2005, which would have been submitted in November of 2006, where you're asked, during the entire period between the beginning of December 31st, 2004 through November 2006, you're asked, have you changed any of your activities? If you're going to get involved fighting HIV and AIDS using Australian money in China, in Vietnam, and in Papua New Guinea, that is a significant departure from what you were doing the preceding year. You should have talked about it, and you didn't. So we keep on
Why does he have the title honorable? Just polite.
Yeah, I don't know. Dishonorable.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's it for this?
That's it.
Okay. So we
Go back
to the slide.
in. Yeah,
okay.
please.
There we go.
Yeah, and so then by the 9th of June, we don't have to pull this up because people have seen this before. We've done, I don't know how many presentations about this audit that was issued by BKD on the 9th of June 2006 that is fundamentally false. It's not even, it's not like, well, I tried. I mean, they can't even get the name of the entity right. The numbers are in fiction. They don't bear any reality, and you can see that, as we've proven time after time, by looking at by cross-checking the income statement versus the balance sheet versus the cash flow statement. It doesn't foot with the tax filings for the Clinton Foundation in 2005. And then on the 10th of September, Bill, this is now his 60th birthday trek. Now, what was happening, Jason, in 2006?
Well, I guess probably Hillary was running for
re-election, and she needed a war chest to trounce whoever was going to go up against her as a Republican. She needed to decisively win in 2006. So they go up to Canada, and they raised tens of millions of dollars in Canada.
Why are you allowed to raise money for a U.S. Senate campaign in Canada?
You're not. And therein, when people get to this whole issue of, Justra, you don't know what you're talking about. No, there's never been an audit of this Clinton Foundation, ever, that complies with the law. So we don't really know. When Dick Morris talks about $100 million coming to the Clinton Foundation, there's no evidence in what is called Schedule B of $100 million coming from, or $144 million, whatever the number is, coming from the Justra entities. There's no evidence that you can see in the clues that are out there for us there's no way that money is documented as being properly gone through the Clinton Foundation. There's no way it was solicited properly. And what were American actors doing, Billy Crystal and other people like that, who's the guy, Tom Hanks, people like that, lending their celebrity star power to fundraising appeals in Toronto. Why were you doing that in Toronto? Probably Weinstein was up there as a bet. Because
Justra.
Because Justra probably figured out, look, what we'll do is you'll send money to us, we'll figure out a way for you to deduct it off your taxes, no one will be able to see the magnitude of it, we'll then route the money back to the Clinton Foundation, and we'll skive it off to fund Hillary's campaign as a bet. I mean, you want something to look at carefully? That's something to look at really carefully. So if we go on the 19th of September, the UNITAID was formally organized in Switzerland. Brazil I put in red just because they were centrally involved in setting this UNITAID up, but they didn't they said they were going to put a bunch of money up, not big money, like France who put a tremendous amount of money, almost $1 billion in the early period. Brazil said they were going to put some money up, but my working hypothesis is that was to get a seat at the table, to have UNITAID and the French money go to these various recipient countries, and then have the Global Fund continue the process that UNITAID might start and give Brazil, therefore, a chance to skim, or people close to the Brazilian government, a chance to skim out of these 42 billion in contributions and 35 billion that we know about in the early period for the Global Fund.
Yeah, see, I felt that hypothesis made a lot of sense because it just seems sensible that if a criminal finds out about another criminal's scheme, they're like, oh, hey, what's my cut?
I'm
so
in
that
on
I
that.
don't tell everybody about it.
Right, I'm in. You can count me in on that.
Right.
So then from the 20th to 22nd, 2006, there's a second illegal Clinton Global Initiative meeting where they falsely claim a whole bunch of business development geeks and deal doers are getting together to,
BizDev.
BizDev, exactly. And no right for the Clinton Foundation to do it. It's not really a charity. They hold the meeting anyway in New York. A week after the meeting is over, Magaziner signs yet another memorandum of understanding to raise 70 million euros, 60 million for Mozambique, 10 for Lesotho to fight HIV/AIDS. And again, if we hit, I think it's the top link. I don't know if it'll work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks, is this the first one?
Memorandum of Understanding.
This is the early one.
Not the right one?
Not the right one, sorry.
Top link here?
No, the second, let's try the second one. It might be that I just got it out.
For some reason, the mouse is not showing up there today. It's
The
every day,
mysterious-
Charles, it makes up its own mind.
Yeah, this is it. Okay, this is 29 September 2006. Okay, look at this. It says, this is Government of Ireland and the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, September 29, 2006. There's no such entity. The entity was called the uppercase William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, except that name was changed on April 28, 2005. So there is no entity on September 29, 2006 called no uppercase the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. And then we go further down and we see the signature, yeah,
Who is that?
Ira Magaziner. This is on behalf of the William J. It would have had a period.
Does he have palsy? That looks like it's barely written.
I don't know. But the point is, it's just, you know, this is, again, I don't know if this is a binding legal document under Irish law.
You could put an X there or a paw print.
Right, exactly. Truman. Yeah, Truman signed it. But, you know, here's another case of a false and materially misleading, I think a deceptive document. And there is no evidence in the Clinton Foundation papers of any government grants from Ireland in this order of magnitude, 70 million euros. So nonetheless, on the 9th of September 2006, of course, Hillary Clinton stomps all over John Spencer, I think it was, she was running against. She just cremates him in the election. And then this is taken from an annual report of UNITAID. There's no link here, but it just says, the UNITAID Secretariat became effective November 2006. The first medications funded by UNITAID are pediatric ARVs, and they are delivered within weeks of November 2006, so by December, to China, Malawi, and Papua New Guinea in cooperation with the Clinton HIV/AIDS initiative, which doesn't exist. I mean, this isn't rocket science, guys, at the FBI. This is not rocket, this is, every single thing here is taken from the public domain.
Charles, there's a lot of comments expressing displeasure with you and I because all this talk and nothing has happened.
Let us keep going.
Now, I will admit, Charles, you and I have been remiss in kicking in doors and acting as independent SWAT teams and actually arresting people and conducting our own trials and things like, oh, wait, yeah, we're not allowed to do any of that.
Right.
So
No, for those of us, the purpose of this exercise is to whip up public interest to the level where those who should be doing something about it will actually be called to actually do something about it.
But instead, they're sitting here in the comments complaining.
Right. Complain to the Attorney General. Complain to your U.S. Attorney. Why aren't you doing more about this? Don't complain about us.
Yeah, there's nothing we can do other than make 2 videos a week. I mean, we're spending hours on this.
Right. So we'll quickly go through this, but These are excerpts from the report for 2006 that UNITAID, which was thinking about giving money to the Clinton Foundation in 2006, should have noticed. Remember, red is bad. Okay? So the direct public support declared for 2006 is 135.8 million. But you know, if you're sitting there at UNITAID in Switzerland, you might want to ask the question, why did the Clinton Foundation need 135.8 million? They'd finished the campus by really December 31st, 2004, and the small additions in 5. Why would you need in 2006? Why do you need 135.8 million more dollars in 2006? For what reason?
80-foot screen, digital sound.
And then there's a line for government grants. They don't admit to any government grants. In 2006, actually from the beginning of time through 2007, 2002 to 2007, there's no listing for government grants, even though you were supposed to say that in the 990 and in state forms for New York and California. So then, in the program services line, they claim they spend $86 million on program services, but there are no financial details on what they did it for. You're supposed to break that number down into the 3 biggest programs and specifically explain, what did you spend $86 million on? The overhead, the management and general figure, to me, just as someone as a numbers guy, seems gamed. I think this figure is just allocated. I think I'm very suspicious of the fact that the other line is huge in the program services detail. And as regards fundraising, they claim that they had no material fundraising offenses when in fact they employed an unlicensed fundraiser. It was disciplined in Pennsylvania, and they had to pay multiple penalties and multiple administrative proceedings around the U.S. They claim they make no payments to affiliates. You know, how did the Arkansas-based foundation get money to Massachusetts and internationally to all these different operations if they didn't pay it to an affiliate, right? So they don't explain any of that. In some, we've talked to you about diversions in the past. When you raise money for Little Rock campus and finish it, and then go on raising hundreds of millions of dollars and not telling people what you're spending on, that's called a diversion. That's illegal, right? So this extra money, $47 million that they made, the change in net assets, was that used to help backstop loans to finance the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2006? Was it actually used straight up to pay people in the foundation who were actually also doing work for Hillary's campaigns and for Democratic Party?
Yeah.
So no part of this makes any sense. I jumped over the other and the total revenues. The investment income seems very low to me on a balance sheet that has so much cash during 2006 when interest rates were still pretty high. They should have had more investment income, and they probably should have had foreign exchange gains and losses, which they haven't disclosed. So you just look at this, without spending a lot of time on this might have taken me 30 minutes to do.
And to be clear, Charles, this is all information. People are in here saying that, you know, James Corbett spoke about all of this years ago and nothing has happened. There's no way James Corbett went into this level of detail.
Who's James Corbett?
The Corbett Report. He's an American guy in Japan who does a lot of good reporting. But this is all figures and information that you spend every day. When I talk to you, you are researching this, pulling information out. I got people emailing me saying, oh, you know, I Googled X, Y, and Z, and here's the first thing that came up that shows that Charles is wrong. We should take just a minute, and I know you're wary of the time, but to talk about the process where you find this information and how you know, not to give away the Colonel's secret recipe, but this is not rehashed material. This is stuff that you're digging out of incredibly...
Sure, so every foundation, every public charity has to file reports with the IRS, and if it's operating in states where there are reporting requirements, which is more than 40 of the US states, and countries where there are reporting requirements, which is most of them, there are a lot of public filings. The Clinton Foundation on their main website reports versions of these filings, but excludes the correct ones and highly material information. So for almost 4 years now, I've been going through a process of looking state by state around the world, laying stuff out, trying to motivate people to launch investigations. And you know, investigations have been launched. They take time. Absolutely. And so what we try to do in this report is try to encourage the public to care about this, We're going to be asked by Elizabeth Warren, the rich people are going to be asked to give up a portion of their wealth. AOC and Democrats want higher earning people to give 70% of their income for taxes. Why should we do that when there's $5 trillion sitting in foundations in the United States? Don't seem to care about the fact that the Clinton Foundation numbers are all wrong, and when the penalties for private foundations giving money to public charities like the Clinton Foundations that are operating illegally are strict. I mean, technically speaking, if Donald Trump wanted to open a can of whoop ass on the private foundation community, the IRS could do a study and just go in, maybe not with 29 FBI agents, but perhaps 3, and go systematically to the 50 plus US private donors, including the Gates Foundation, and say, look, you guys have got to pay up. The reason these governments put money into this fraud is because you thought you were going to get some benefit out of Hillary Clinton as president. So you were willing to give small money for you, 100 million or so, to these foundations, not care too much what happened to it, so that when push came to shove and the Hillary Clinton Justice Department had an inkling that they might go after Microsoft or some other of your ventures, you'd be able to say, not so much, you know?
Well, Charles, perhaps I could suggest to the people that are typing in these comments that they're angry with us, take this video presentation and type a little message to your maybe congressional representative and tell them, hey, why don't we investigate this?
What's happening?
Exactly. Be angry with them. They're the ones that are supposed to do something.
Yeah. So if we quickly go, we're actually going to be able to finish this even possibly on time. This is a statement of the 10 payments that were made, that the UNITAID admits that it made to something that did not exist legally, Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. 71.8 million in 10 separate payments went, probably from Switzerland, to some place in the United States. We don't know whether it was Little Rock first or Boston first or maybe internationally. These are the payments. 10 separate times UNITAID allowed, the board of UNITAID allowed 71.8 million to go into what I think is just a complete fraud. Now, we don't need to look at this link here, Jason. This is a link to the IRS rules, or a dated memo from 1992 about the rules you have to jump through concerning operating a U.S. charity operating internationally. But let's look at the second link, open corporates. This one here.
Yep. For something, I don't understand
there we
why.
Go.
But
let's punch in Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative and see what we get.
Did I spell it all
Yeah,
correctly?
it still should work. All right.
I didn't spell it correctly.
It's fine. It's fine. Look, here you go. Down here it says
S.
Previously known as Clinton Foundation. This is interesting.
This seems like Bill Clinton's real company, Ass Inc.
That's in South Africa. Oh. Then there's one in India. Then there's this one here in Arkansas. And then there's one in Massachusetts.
So what does that indicate?
None of these entities were lawfully organized.
How can you tell?
Huh?
How do you know?
Because I know.
But I mean from other stuff, not from something. When you say this is interesting, what caught your eye here is what I'm getting at.
Well, that there would be so many legal jurisdictions that would think that an entity could be called Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative that would have anything to do with the Clinton Foundation that had legal authority to operate. This one here, see, it says inactive. This one was liquidated, as far as Arkansas is concerned, on the 31st of December, 2005. Okay, that would mean this was liquidated. This one could, there was no legal authority for the Clinton Foundation to control anything internationally, but let alone
This is India?
India. Here's South Africa. Now, to be very cute, if we go back up to the search function.
Well, I just want to tell you one thing about South Africa that's pretty important, I think. The Moriartys have told us that they met the plenipotentiary or something like that, ambassador of South Africa, who said that he couldn't help them because Hillary Clinton had specifically visited and said unless South Africa participates in her war against Libya, they would soon find rebels in their own backyard. So I wonder what influence the Clintons were exerting
they
over
have
South Africa.
massive influence there and in India. But if we go back into the search function and now take out the plural, it's just HIV/AIDS initiative, just take out the S and see what you get. Here, in Tanzania, they come up with something, Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc.
Wow.
See, this is the hallmark of fraud. You take something that's slightly different, and it's in Tanzania, they're going to say, man, AIDS.
It's got to be the same, must be a typo.
Bill Clinton was here, you know.
Yeah, it can't be fake.
Right.
That was really Bill Clinton.
You idiot. So, and I haven't tried to go around the world to consider all the different places where they may have spelt it, you know, slightly differently. And this is an exercise, though. Open Corporates is an excellent portal if you're trying to figure out, you know, what somebody may be saying they have around the world by way of a company. It's a good place to go.
Really?
So if we go back into the slide.
That is a good place to go.
We've given a link before to the Fortune thing. Hit this Google Drive thing for a second. This is
This one?
the bottom one, yeah, please. All right, now if we scroll down the page a little bit, this is going to be the subject of a whole separate presentation. Just stop right there for a second. This is about 70-page evaluation that was made on the 13th of September 2013. 70 pages that really deserves close scrutiny, and we'll get close scrutiny from us. But why is the 13th of September 2013 very important? In August of 2013, New York Times writes a piece, Unease at Clinton Foundation over finances and ambition. And that was the thing that got Bill Clinton sent him into orbit. You know, it was critical of sloppiness at the Clinton Foundation, whatever. These people this Dahlberg Association is a consulting firm specializing in evaluating projects for donors. And it has been around for a while. It has McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group, you know, good pedigree people run this thing. So they're smart people. And this report, though, in my view, is a whitewash. It sets up a rubric in simple terms, or these are the categories that we're going to grade you on, and the scale is, you know, super awesome to awesome. You know, it's
To we did more good than bad.
Exactly, and they take you through. There's a lot of process in it. And they take you through all this stuff, and on the one hand, on the other hand, but when nowhere does the report actually ask the question, does the freaking thing actually exist?
Oh,
Which is something that would be helpful to know.
well, that's one of those things like you never see a technical support FAQ that says, is it plugged in? Because it's sort of like, that's the first thing you gotta...
Right.
You don't have that, you got nothing.
Are we talking about the gadget or the pizza pie that you're eating with the beer? Anyway, it's the same thing. So on September 13th, they published this thing, and I think it's a murder indictment, but people look at it and say, this is fantastic. What happens next? By November 2nd, 2013, a decision is reached at the Clinton Foundation to give the Clinton family ironclad control of all aspects of the Clinton Foundation, including this chai. Now, if you scroll in this way down, when you get to a list of documents.
How far down?
Keep going, it's like page 30 or so.
Are there page
Keep
numbers?
going. Yeah, well, we'll see. There's 19. Oh, keep going. This is just an evaluation of the second line HIV/AIDS thing. But if you keep going, you're almost there, I think. Yeah, keep going, sorry.
35?
Keep going, yeah. Sorry, it could be like 15, I may have had it wrong.
No problem. We need some...
Yeah. Exactly, some Brazilian music in the background. You see, these guys know how to make charts.
This is not it?
Nope. There's a long list of documents they reviewed, which is very helpful because The Clinton Foundation has successfully hidden those documents.
Yeah, I mean, most people get a thing like this and like, yada, yada, yada. It looks like somebody spent a lot of time writing this, and they don't actually read it.
No, but that's not what I do.
Oh, well, most people, I said.
All right, yeah, here we go. Annex 2 is the next one.
Annex 2.
There we go.
Okay.
This is the kind of stuff. You have, you have a project agreement with 6 annexes from February of 7, when the thing didn't exist. A CHI report with 10 annexes. March of 2007, it didn't exist. Interim report, activity reports, CHI annual report with 12 annexes. We don't have that. Another CHI annual report with 12 annexes. We don't. Go to the next page.
Wouldn't Frank Giustra have to do with Lionsgate? Didn't he invest in it?
Yeah, he created it.
He didn't create it. He invested in it.
No, he took it over and made it big. So I just want to get, there's an audit here from Price Waterhouse, March of 2012. March, slowly. Let's see, where is it? CHI annual report, yeah. Procurement and financial review of UNITAID, pediatric and second line HIV/AIDS project, Price Waterhouse Coopers, dated March 2012. I want that.
Where can that be gotten?
I don't know, but we got to get that. So
say it again.
Item 34, procurement and financial review of UNITAID's pediatric and second-line HIV/AIDS projects, Price Waterhouse Coopers, dated March 2012. Why is this important? If Price Waterhouse had done their work properly, reviewing this gigantic amount of money that had been sent, almost $300 million, between 2007 and 2009.
Instead of eyeballing Jennifer Lawrence at the Oscars.
Right. Then they would have not made the decision to take the assignment to audit the parent Clinton Foundation, to take the reins over from BKD. This shows that, and Price Waterhouse is a big organization, that Price Waterhouse is not controlled carefully enough. They probably looked starry-eyed at this Clinton Global Initiative and said, look, this is Bill Clinton, Hillary's going to be president, she's the Secretary of State at this point. This is the gravy train. We get on the right side of the Clintons, and Hillary is president. We assist them in covering up this mess. We'll get studies, we'll get this, whatever. No one's going to go after us. Plus, we'll know all the dirt on the Clintons.
All the free IMAX movies you can watch.
Right. So if we go back into the body of this presentation, this is a document that people will want to chew on. We go to the next page. So all they send is 71.8 million in the first period. How many of these numbers, Jason, are red?
Is it all of them?
Yeah, pretty much. So in this period, from the 10 payments that are made between 15 January 2008 and 15 December 2009, there is no lawful entity Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative in existence. That doesn't stop UNITAID from sending, call it $225 million in 10 separate wires somewhere, right?
How much was each wire?
In total, it was $22.5 million on average.
That's crazy, because when I was doing Daydreams of Dubai, they were trying to wire $10,000 at a time. You would have thought it was like...
I know. Taking money out of a bank is never as easy as putting money in. It's like,
right.
What are you going to do with your money?
Well,
it's none of your freaking business.
Because there was some kind of, anti-9/11 law.
Sure, money law. Know your client, yeah. So note I put one of these things in italics, the 14th payment on 5 June 2008, supposedly for second-line drugs, $31.3 million. That was made by UNITAID, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. Now, what happened on the 5th of June 2008?
I don't remember, Charles.
Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama met in Dianne Feinstein's house that day.
But okay, so people were in the comments talking about Bilderberg. I remember
we're getting to that.
Both driving up.
We're getting to that.
Okay.
That happened, we're getting to that.
And was that when Alex Jones was at the Bilderberg thing?
I don't know if he was there then. But so the idea was that UNITAID in theory had strict controls. One of the ways they were going to impose these controls is that when you start wiring money across national boundaries to fraudulent entities that don't exist, you run afoul of very serious laws for which people generally go to prison for a long time. One of the things UNITAID said is, if we're going to give you this money, in so many words, you've got to comply with local law. So let's look and see in 2007 how much money did they spend. They received $71.8 million from UNITAID. How much did they spend on total legal expenses, Jason, in 2007? If you go down the page, you'll see it.
Oh, well, is it?
$18,437.
I thought that was like, every 1,000 equals a million or something.
No, that's how much money they spent for all of the Clinton Foundation on legal fees.
I don't believe that, because I've had years, even when I'm not getting sued by two morons, where I've spent more than that on legal stuff.
Right. Yeah. So then you look in this 2007. We did not know until that Dahlberg report how many memorandums of understanding the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative signed around the world, but supposedly they signed 24 out of 25. Okay, this means that they would have spent, maybe they got pro bono, free legal work, but if they used the lawyer to do any of these MOUs, they spent less than $1,000 per MOU in 2007 to do any of this legal work and to collect $71.8 million. I mean, so this Ira Magaziner guy, who's a rogue scholar, who's the genius behind this operation, is sloppy as hell. I would use a different word, but it's a family program.
Today it is.
Yeah, and then so 2008, same idea. 24 MOUs. This time they spend about $10,000 an MOU. You cannot study, relationship between Clinton Foundation HIV in Boston and, let's say, in Nigeria. You are not going to get any serious legal people to get a memorandum done properly with the Nigerian government for $10,000. It's not going to happen.
I was going to say, I cannot imagine an international business negotiation with someone on the level of Bill Clinton having a lawyer remotely close to it that costs only $10,000.
Well, and then you get to the place of saying, all right, look, I'm on the board of trustees. Being on the board of trustees, being on the board of trustees of a charity is frankly a pain in the ass, because you can't charge, you shouldn't really charge for your time. If a problem happens, the corporation is not going to be able to reimburse your expenses. So you do it as a labor of love.
It's your own charitable contribution.
Well, and so typically speaking, you can get the homeless guy who stands on 27th Street and 6th in the winter with his shirt off, smoking a cigarette. You probably get him to be on the trustee, but you probably want a serious person who has something has something at risk. And so if you're a serious person, you're not getting paid, there's only downside, isn't your natural default to say to our magazine, or listen, about those 13 crackberries and all these projects you're doing around the world, climate change and all that other crap, stop that bullshit, produce a lawyer worth his or her salts, and explain to us as trustees why we should not be very concerned that you had your license to operate in Massachusetts involuntarily revoked effective December 31st, 2007, and we just have learned in 2008 that you may have diverted $20+ million in donations for purposes that are not authorized. Explain to us why, in that environment, we're only spending $10,000 on, assuming all of this went to the MOUs, $10,000 an MOU. Obviously, there was no oversight of this Clinton Foundation, but what was going on in 2008? A little bit of a presidential campaign, a little bit of a getting ready to be Secretary of State.
Right. If you're Bill Clinton and your wife is running for president, you're going to have any kind of document written by a lawyer for $10,000? I don't believe it.
Right. And so clearly you take a look at this, and for so many different reasons, if you don't need to have your hackles up and say, you look at this. Obviously, this was a wind-up from day one. This was never intended to be a serious enterprise to help people in the countries involved. It was an attempt to get government money to flow to Switzerland so that an inside group could steal that money. That would be the presumption I would use. In the same way that washerwoman Schultz is going around saying that clearly Trump is in hock to Putin, I get to say, on the basis of far more credible evidence, that lifelong the scammer couple from hell, the Clintons, who had been scamming from day one, clearly by 2006, the evidence would suggest that if you were, say, running the FBI, Bob Mueller, if you were running the FBI in 2006, which you were, and if you had just let the Clinton Foundation off the hook, in a 4-year investigation that should have caught the fraud well before 2006, which you did incorrectly let them off the hook, that is to say the FBI did, certainly by 2006, people in the FBI, and there should be records in the FBI, obviously, that on the one hand, if there are no records, then the FBI is truly conflicted and hopeless. Or on the other hand, if there are records of people being concerned about this, where are those records? And who said, you know what, about that over there, this Clinton Foundation fraud, which we're all in on, that's not something.
Bit?
Yeah, get those bleach bit things going, man. I mean, this to me is just an indictment for recklessness for everybody involved, and a prescription. And people who want to get agitated, public outcry is what will bring the swamp to heal, right? I'm not going to go to Washington and fix it. One person can't fix it. We need a massive crowd with not, I don't mean violence, but Barack Obama, after AIG was seized, there was an important meeting where people were going to the executives' houses and they were saying, we're going to go take these people.
But they were the employees who lost all their money or something.
No,
right?
no, they were the employees and the
loan holders,
agitators and everything. And they went to Barack Obama, and Barack Obama's response was, "I'm the only person standing between you and the pitchforks." I.e., if I decide to whip the people who want to do violence up, I can do that. He's quoted as saying that. I'm not advocating violence. But I am, if you want to get agitated about anything, get agitated with people in both parties who've had this evidence sitting before them for years now, and let's see some indictments. Let's see them soon. Go to the next page. We'll fly. We're almost done. This will look a bit daunting, but this gives those who want to sharpen up, and again, our audience the target of these presentations are people in the FBI and the investigative organizations. Hillary announced her plan to run the 20th of January 2007, just as those wires started flying in from UNITAID, right? On the 10th of July 2007, an entity became organized, William J. Clinton Foundation UK. We've talked about this before, but it involved dopey Andrew Kessel, asleep at the switch Bruce Lindsay, and English counsel, which is a serious matter that English counsel would be involved in a corrupt, deceptive, international set of frauds. They articulate a view in these filings, which you can see on Companies House, that this entity would have the right to fight AIDS and climate change and obesity and all this kind of stuff because the parent had that right, which it did not.
We'll just do whatever they want.
Exactly, that's how they roll. So then on the 31st of December, Massachusetts says, "Thou art out of business."
Yeah, I mean, they knew he was an idiot. He's got that rusty Weber grill in the backyard.
Right, and it's rusty. Yeah. And then and it's not coon-based hot sauce in the grill either. Anyway, so 9th of January 2008, BKD issues an audit for 2006, okay, which was due November 15th, 2007. So it's just on its face fraudulent. March 12th, 2008, this William J. Clinton Foundation registers with the Charity Commission, the equivalent of filing a 1023 in the U.S. They get English tax exemption a bit on the basis of a fraudulent application. The March 31st, the Clinton Foundation people learn, we're out of business. The 2nd, 3rd of April 2008, there's a board meeting of the UNITAID board in the capital of Brazil, Brasilia. I think there have been 30 or so executive board meetings since September or thereabouts 2006. 29 of them were in Switzerland. 1 was in Brasilia. My suspicion here, this is right when, and this is a working thesis, Hillary and Obama were running neck and neck. She had a prayer of winning, but Obama had done much better than she had hoped, and the Clintons had hoped. And the Brazilians understood that, in my view. They understood that Hillary was likely not going to be president, and that they had they couldn't lose either way. If she was president, they'd have the dirt that the Clinton Foundation was a complete fraud and was ungovernable, was all out of kilter. If she lost, they had a major league ally in Hillary Clinton, particularly if she became Secretary of State, which she did. Okay, so I think there should be a lot of emails and communications flying around the Clinton Foundation, which would be what? On a secret server, or available perhaps to the NSA and others. There's got to be a lot of information that's available and accessible that, particularly if one were to take the Roger Stone approach and the Manafort approach of saying, this is a gigantic fraud, far bigger than what Mueller may be investigating. Let's put some real FBI and CIA and other resources on it. By the 11th of April 2008, I know this because I was following GE very closely. This is when GE literally shocked those of us who were concerned about them and issued, just they puked on Wall Street. I mean, people were expecting positive earnings and forward guidance that was great, and they said, you know what, for the first time ever really in recent memory, we're going to miss by a mile and lower our forward guidance, caused all kinds of problems. Meanwhile, Hillary is now fighting and losing primary after primary. At some point in May 2008, this lawyer, member of the bar, because I checked in New York, still a member of the bar. That's not the alcoholic bar, but the real bar.
Yeah, we know a lot of members of that other bar.
She begins this legal review. Now, you're not supposed to, if you're a member of the bar in New York, you're not supposed to be involved with committing any kind of fraud or illegal activity. And if you become aware of it, you're supposed to notify.
Well, if you're a member of New York State, you're not supposed to be committing fraud or illegal activity. But as a member of the bar, I guess it's doubly important that you don't do that.
Right. We talked about this 5 June 2008 meeting at Senator Feinstein's East Coast mansion in Washington, D.C. I think it was our friend Kevin pointed out, and I confirm here, that there was the Bilderberg meeting happens between the 5th and the 8th of June.
I seem to remember video of Hillary and Obama arriving in 2 separate town cars, and somebody did confirm in the comments that Alex Jones did cover it that year.
So if you go back to that period, which we probably all remember well, those of us who were thinking about politics and economics, it was clear that McCain was going to lose to me from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And so was this a case where Bilderbergers and others said, you know what, we need our hooks into the next president of the United States.
And we need to stamp out Alex Jones and all his buddies.
Well, but more importantly, we need to let Obama and Clinton know that we know a lot of stuff about them, and we're going to allow them to win, and we're going to allow them to pretend to run the world, but they need to remember who really runs the world. And it's the list of participants in Bilderberger and Davos and other places who knew and saw, maybe just as is happening now, a crisis coming, and wanted to be on the right side of Obama, wanted to be on the right side of Hillary as Secretary of State. This is, again, a working hypothesis that makes a lot more sense to me than the crap that comes out of the mainstream media even now. The mainstream media is prepared to doubt everything about the Trumps and the Trump administration, but they swallow hook, line, and sinker the narrative about the Clintons, the narrative about the benefits of unregulated globalism, the narratives about the success of the Obama administration. It's time for some more balance. I'm not even looking for tough questions. I'm just looking for... the scandal-free environment. So by the 4th of November, Barack wins. 6 days later, we have this memo that's been up before about Kamiki Gibson basically saying, look, Bruce, the CEO of Clinton Foundation, it's a fraud, in so many words. If you read, it's a draft. There were probably exhibits to it. Sometimes people will write first draft, even though it's not a first draft. It could have been earlier drafts. It's asking in the content of this thing, it asks for the authority to do additional work through the December board meeting. So we don't know what other work has been done. But we do know from our own independent collective review of the public filings that there's rampant evidence of fraud. There's a gigantic forest fire, a fraud forest fire burning around all this stuff. And Rod Rosenstein's like, nah. Comey, I don't think so. Mueller, Holder, what are you talking about?
Eric Holder might be the worst among them. He's just kind of dormant right now.
And then, Valerie Jarrett, so, with all this, she's supposedly smart, all this, on the 16th of November 2008, we have the official thing that Tom Fitton got back from the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request Department of the State, supposed to be accurate, saying, this MOU says everything's like freaking fantastic about the Clinton Foundation. Kumiki, what does she know? Everything's great. Fantastic. So let's just say there's a contrast of views between what stuff that's available in the public domain shows you and what the Clintons claim is history. And then these two senators, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, get together with their staffs, and my working theory is that they worked together to deceive people on the Foreign Relations Committee and in the Senate to install Hillary Clinton in position as Secretary of State, knowing full well that there would be no transparency into the emails. They would spend as much time as possible trying to cover their tracks, but unfortunately you can't cover all these tracks. And so they went down a path right after November 4th, 2008, perhaps even before then, of trying to cover up the largest set of charity frauds ever attempted, milking governments around the world, include not just the United States, but other governments. And so the question, we haven't yet introduced this idea, we'll do it now when closing. Bar associations, this is just New York law, the New York code that applies to lawyers. And it lays out, you would think, well, before we get into the paper, this assumes that you have somebody in an attorney general and whoever the right people to enforce this are in New York State who would actually do something about it. I think lawyers and accountants, it seems, are in this business of writing these high-sounding memoranda and statutes and regulations that nobody enforces unless you want to turn your attention on Donald Trump or a Republican or somebody who's not in favor. And that's a very different, dangerous approach to have. Lawyers should be operating, in theory, to a higher level. It should be tough to become a lawyer. It should be tough to pass the bar. I guess that's why Hillary had a little trouble with that.
I think a lot of people have difficulty passing the bar.
Right, but I'm saying somebody who's the smartest woman in the world should have passed the bar the first time.
Does that person know Hillary Clinton?
So you're supposed to, it says a lawyer or a law firm shall not be engaged in illegal conduct that adversely reflects on the lawyer's honesty, trustworthy.
That's the caveat,
right? Yeah, nothing could adversely affect. Everybody knows I'm a crook.
That's a wide open door, Charles.
But if you look at these things, I mean, if this, apply Rule 8.4, apply it to Kamiki Gibson. You can't apply it to Bill Clinton. He doesn't, I checked, Bill and Hillary are not registered as lawyers in New York. Can't apply it to Barack Obama or Michelle. They're also not lawyers. But you could apply it to Kamiki Gibson, and you could apply it to Victoria Bjorklund and the people of Simpson Thatcher and the people of Patterson, Belknap, and Webb, a very good law firm that was paid a fair amount of money in 2017 for legal work. So you're not supposed to engage in these sorts of activities, but then when you see, as a lawyer, professional misconduct, you're supposed to know, you're supposed to report such knowledge to a tribunal or other authority empowered to investigate or act upon such violation. So how come, there are a lot of lawyers out there, how come with all this smoke, and today we have a this just in from Hillary Clinton, you notified me, I think, about it, that she actually in recent days or maybe hours is doing fundraising appeals from her Onward Together crooked outfit, which I don't even know whether it's a charity or political action committee, raising money and encouraging people to combat baseless allegations, in quotes, against the Clinton Foundation. Baseless allegations.
Yeah, well, good thing we got a firm base for our allegations.
I mean, that's not the report. She's not ruling, that's a companion piece, but I did another.
All right, hang on. Did I send you that?
No, I sent it to you. It's Aaron Klein's piece.
I'm not seeing it immediately. Charles, while we're doing all this...
It's Breitbart. Aaron Klein's a good guy. I've interviewed with him a few times.
While we're doing all this talking about New York law, some people are expressing their dissatisfaction with the new law that allows late-term abortions. I'm just hoping they're going to extend it to fetuses 71 years of age and over, and maybe we could apply it to Hillary Clinton. I
mean, as someone who is delighted to have two now grown adults, any human being who could cavalierly think that the decision to have an abortion is an easy decision to make, whether, I don't care whether you're a man, woman, or whatever you may be. It's not a simple decision. But it's especially not a simple decision after, I would argue, about certainly 20 weeks and maybe even 10. But to suggest the normal gestation period is 40 weeks, to suggest that you should be willy-nilly thinking about there's no consequence to having an abortion 40 weeks in, I mean, that is barbaric thinking, far outside the norm of, take the civilized countries across the planet, that is so far outside the norm. And that Andrew Cuomo, I mean, I suppose it's a good thing, because he'll never be president of the United States. I mean, he's the way he and others,
around his neck like an albatross.
He and others who gleefully celebrate this thing are just, they're not inspired, they're not anointed, they're not that intelligent, and they're not in touch with reality. But this is the piece, this is, I'm surprised it only has 23 shares so far. Aaron Klein is a very good guy. I don't know if he's now he used to be based in Jerusalem. He used to have a radio show on WABC that I've been on a few times. But yeah, here's a recent piece just out saying...
How does it grow her email list by claiming that?
Well, see, in a missive sent, Hillary Clinton utilized what she claimed were false accusations and baseless assaults against the controversial Clinton Foundation in order to build up the foundation's email list. And when you go further down the page, there's no listing of what these baseless allegations are. Standard Hillary Clinton.
I can tell you exactly what the baseless allegations against me are.
Clinton did not specify exactly which alleged false allegations and baseless assaults against the Clinton Foundation she was referring to. The standard approach. There are these baseless allegations. Give me more money.
So then I guess the other part of this is that someone who believes her that there's baseless allegations then hears an allegation and says, oh, that must be one of those baseless ones.
That's right, this is baseless. Amazing.
Oh, Charles. Do we have any more on the slide there?
That's it.
You're supposed to say, who are you calling a moron? That was a real conversation somebody had in my high school.
Really?
Yeah. Well, okay, so we got the...
We've done it all.
All right, we've done it all. Very good. Yeah, as I said, there's a number of baseless allegations that have been leveled against me, and I'm certainly open to address each of them publicly because they're purely false. And it's interesting how the people making the allegations refuse to have me on their Field McConnell show. So, who?
Who?
Yeah, sorry.
Is he wearing a yellow vest?
I don't know. He's publicly insulting me and posting false articles on abledanger.org. And when I try to call him to talk about it, he doesn't take the call. And he's lying to people about it and lying to people about why David left after Field told him to leave. It's really sad. But I don't want to talk about that, Charles. I want to talk about, it's Sunday night. Everybody's getting ready for the coming week. Of course, tomorrow we're going to have another episode of the new show, Unseen Libya, with Jimmy and Joanne Moriarty. So I hope that people will go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and join. If they want to watch tomorrow's show, they can also go to patreon.com/James and Joanne Moriarty. But how could I forget? We also have Ole Damagard in the morning. So Monday is now like
busy.
A two for a day for people who are sponsoring the show on Patreon. And it is really important. The shows cannot continue. Even the free shows like Sunday with Charles and Charles Ortell is closing in. All the work that I do is supported only by the sponsors. And all these people making these fake allegations, baseless assaults, not on the Clinton Foundation, but Crowdsource the Truth. They seem focused on having us demonetized, and they don't want to talk about the actual allegations. They just want to make them, block me, make them in venues where I am blocked. It's crazy. But anyway, Charles, thanks for another great presentation. I love Brazil. I didn't really feel like we traveled to Brazil today, but we spoke about it, so that was useful.
There'll be a lot more to do on that.
And we'll be closing in on Wednesday. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great night.